Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is flow. And if flow is something we just have to wait for, moments of inspiration, or if it's something that we can create habits and patterns to support so that we have more ready access to it. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning, this Friday, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started in our conversation about flow, we're going to just take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and rub them vigorously. Feel that friction, the texture, the pressure, the temperature, the buzzing, and allow those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome. Good morning, Gia. So wonderful to have you here with us this morning. Welcome. So it's Friday and we're going to talk about flow. And I think so many times we feel like we're swimming against the current, trying to swim upriver, and things feel like a struggle. And then there are other times when we experience being in the flow, where things just happen effortlessly, things move forward at a at a natural unfoldment, or in a natural unfoldment, where just things feel easy, rather than that we're confronting resistance in every moment. And how is it that we can initiate flow? And it was interesting, the way that I set up these talks every morning is I get myself ready, and at 9:15 Eastern time, I sit in front of my computer and I do the technical setup that I need to do for these talks. And then I tune in to say, okay, what's there? What are we going to talk about today? And even if it's within the last 5 minutes, typically something comes up and I can write a description, and then I know what I'm going to talk about, but I don't know what I'm going to talk about before that process. Usually, sometimes I do, but it's really interesting in thinking about the notion of flow. It's as though my other than conscious being is programmed that this time of day, this particular time, I'm plugged in to flow. I'm plugged into inspiration that comes in this window every morning. And it occurs to me, I'm not an expert on flow. There are people that just make a study of it and how to create it and generate it regularly. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. But I'm not one of those people. However, what I notice is that because of the regularity of this practice, it seems that I have created a way to tap in to this resource, this pool of possibility with some regularity, where I every morning, without fail, something comes up that I get to talk about. And I don't know, as I said, I don't know what it's going to be ahead of time. So how interesting is that we can create space for inspiration. And this is something that I think a lot of writers do, where they have a time that they allocate, dedicate to their creative work. So on a daily basis, they put themselves in front of the computer or whatever, whatever their writing implements are, and they sit there and they get their inspiration. That's, excuse me, it's a practice, not unlike a meditation practice, where your body and being gets acclimated to, okay, this time of day, this is my meditation time. And so your being prepares itself more deeply for those moments to be able to really move into that meditative space with less impediments, less distraction, because you've already conditioned yourself to be going into that space. So it's interesting because, we look at habit. Often habit becomes something that we are at the effect of, and it runs us more than we utilize it. But there are beneficial habits. So you've probably heard of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, or, things like that. There are habits of being that can be what I'm going to call regenerative. The definition of regeneration is something that forwards life, that is life affirming and life generating. And so this practice that I engage in to set up for these talks every morning, I consider it's a regenerative practice, but it's reliable in a very surprising way. Every weekday morning, bam, I get some kind of idea about what I'm going to talk to you about. And this is another example of being life living itself through me, because it's not that I have an agenda that I establish ahead of time. It's that I have an intention, and I have a space that I allocate expressly for that purpose, and it gets fulfilled. So I wonder if you guys have any practices that you do that support you in this way. Are there Rosalind says, flow, having the sense of one, free to flow into, and you left us hanging there, Rosalind. I wonder, and out of. Okay, beautiful. Flowed into and out of. Yes. So, good morning, Dido. So good to have you here with us this morning. So, what we're looking at is how we can induce flow. Like, what would that be like if we could just put ourselves into the flow at will? And I have found that having this context of time is something that really has been effective, even though I hadn't consciously and deliberately designed it in that way with that expectation. That's kind of the result. And it occurs to me that there are probably other places in my life where I could implement a similar strategy to create a desired state. And I'm wondering if you see places in your life where you might be able to do that. It's really interesting to me too that for the most part, I do not have, nor do I appreciate a regular routine. You know, mostly I prefer to free flow things. However, the 9 a.m. Eastern time commitment that I have to show up here allows me this aspect of flow and regularity, continuity. If I didn't have the obligation, the commitment to show up for you guys, I would not have the regular practice. I don't enforce those kinds of schedules on myself. The things that I have that are regular are things that I have commitments to show up for other people. So whether it's this or client appointments or things for sustainability now, for our movie night, for example, those are all things where I show up for other people on a timed kind of schedule. But otherwise, when I don't have those commitments, my schedule's kind of freeform. So, Rosalind, you're such a poet. Truly, truly. I love this. So Rosalind says, continue to change the container, and the boundaries are like water. The shape will change to the new container. These talks help with that for me. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you. I love the notion of changing the container and the boundaries changing, or the possibilities changing shape also. And we can take that idea of the container into our lives. We often talk about how experience is dictated by context. So the context that we create sets up a framework through which we experience or interpret our circumstances and the events of our lives. And so being alert to the container that we create is a useful thing, because we can then shift the container to shift our experience. So we're talking about interpretive context. So what does, if I perceive a circumstance as an obligation, or like a heavy obligation, like an obligation that I'm not enjoying, it's going to be a very different experience from experiencing or interpreting that commitment as an opportunity, right? So for me, this is a commitment to be here with you guys. And I consider it an obligation, but not an obligation that is in any way oppressive, but an obligation that is an opportunity. It's a very different context, right? Because it's an opportunity to connect, an opportunity to discover. For me, it is. Hopefully, it is for you too. But it's really interesting how we set containers. And so my 15-minute container in the beginning of each weekday morning kind of sets the pace. It gets me in action, and it gets me engaged with the day. It feeds me in so many ways. So Gia says, I find it difficult to free flow in day-to-day life. I believe it should be planned. How can we free flow? Well, I think different temperaments resonate with different patterns. I find that sometimes, sometimes the free flow leaves me in a space where I just kind of get lost, and other times it feels freeing. I think one of the ways that we can support ourselves in free flow is if we ask ourselves positive questions like, what would most serve me in this moment? Or what is calling for my attention? What is my energy calling for right now? So also having awareness, sometimes having an actual list of things that may be calling for your attention, things to choose from, that can be helpful too. To be moving from maybe a directed inspiration, if there is such a thing, to say, okay, I've got all these things, what is calling me? What's wanting my attention? So for me, I've been working on creating a video to share my eco park vision. And for a while, it kind of dropped off the radar. And yesterday, or I think it was yesterday or the day before, it showed up for me again. Not because somebody said anything, but because there was the energy for it, and I was able to move through it in a way that felt much more in flow. And so I have more presence, more readiness for it now than I did before. It felt like I was kind of pushing the river. And when I went back to it yesterday or the day before, it just flowed. So we don't always have the luxury of waiting for things to flow before we do them. Sometimes we're time bound and have a limit to to a constraint as far as when something has to be completed. But when we do have the opportunity to move into what's calling to me, I mean, we all have our to-dos, right? And the thing is that many of our to-dos are not as urgent as we make them out to be. And in fact, some of those to-dos are things that we just avoid. I would write this to-do list, and there were things that I just never did, because the truth was I didn't really want to. I didn't feel committed to do them, so I didn't do them. You know, and then of course there are to-dos that we don't have that freedom around, but we may notice that there are different times of day based on our own personal rhythms that are more productive for us, that are more inspiration based times of the day. So you may consider yourself a morning person or a night person, and when we look at those times of being energized, there may be certain things that lend themselves to that energy, that and other things that lend themselves to the quiet down energy. And tuning into these rhythms within ourselves and being respectful of them to the greatest degree that we can, I believe is nurturing on many levels and feeds our sense of health and well-being, rather than forcing ourselves to do things all the time that we don't want to do. Because if we're forcing ourselves to do things all the time that we don't want to do, we're constantly creating resistance, and that resistance, it takes energy. Now there are other times when, you know, it's creating the momentum. That's a challenge, or, you know, to break past the inertia, to move into some kind of action, some kind of flow, some kind of movement. And once we do that, then we're able to get into the flow. But it's overcoming the initial resistance. And that can feel like forcing ourselves. Yeah, I'm just kind of weighing all these seemingly paradoxical aspects of when do we exert will and when do we connect with inspiration. I think connecting with intention is probably something that supports us in opening to that flow state, connecting with intention. Because again, we talk about a lot about how getting outside of ourselves allows us to be a greater expression of ourselves. So one of the ways that I find I'm able to get outside myself is by connecting with a greater vision, connecting with something bigger. And that can be, you know, bigger than my most mundane desires or activities. So Gia says, I think I have to listen to this episode again. I'm sure there's so much more for me. Well, thank you, Gia. I hope that there is. That would be great. What we're looking at is how to Huh. This is so bizarre. It seems that I disappeared there. So Dido says, from what I understand from reading about states of psychological flow, it's thank you, Dido. I don't know what happened. So bizarre. Isn't it funny? Don't you love the way the universe winks at us to just just here I am talking about flow and things disappeared. So bizarre. So bizarre. Anyway, it seems that I haven't here we go. Sorry. All these technical things. So it cracks me up. We're talking about flow and then everything just sort of went kaflooey. But Dido says, from what I understand about reading about states of psychological flow, it's where you lose track of time doing something you love. There are many ways to help enter that state depending on who you are. For example, gardening, skiing, feeling loved. It's the opposite of boredom or worry. Exactly. I'm still cracking up about talking about flow and having everything get disoriented and fall apart. Um, so the point that you're making, Dido, is excellent about how kind of time disappears. And I have to tell you that so many times in these conversations with you guys, time disappears. Like all of a sudden, a half hour has gone by and I don't know what happened or where it went. And so I think it can be, I know I've experienced a sense of flow when I'm immersed in something. It doesn't necessarily even have to be something I love, but it's something that I'm fully engaged in. And what happens is that the sense of time disappears. Um, I just, I'm still cracking up, like this is so funny to be talking about flow and have that whole disruption of flow happen in the midst of it. I guess it's um, so that we get to see the contrast, right? Too funny, too funny. You gotta love the sense of humor of the universe, right? And we get to laugh at ourselves and circumstance, and I call these winks from the universe, that kind of happening. It's just, I'm listening kind of thing. I love it. Gia says, being in flow can also look like whatever you do, you engage with it totally. It can look like force, but later it comes naturally. May not always, though. So I think you said two things there, Gia, and I think they're both valid. When you're engaging in something totally, you're kind of losing the periphery, right? Like there's this focus, there's this immersion. And when there is that immersion, I don't believe it is force. It's just being present. It's a state of being, a state of presence, a state of engagement. Um, and there are books actually, and Dido, I'm guessing you've read at least one of them that talk about the state of flow. And this is really so last night I couldn't sleep, so I was going through my email. Probably not the best thing to have screen time when you're trying to go to sleep. And Blinkist came up as an app to check out. And so this is really, really funny too. Gia says, I'm loving the flow of the universe that's happening now. As you said, wink from the universe. Yes, exactly. So this was funny with Blinkist. Blinkist is essentially Cliff Notes for books, but it's available in audio, where it'll give you a it may be also available written, but it's giving you the highlights from all these different books. So in like 15-minute segments, you can get the gist of all these different books and consume more information in a shorter period of time. You know, so we're talking about productivity versus essence. Like there are lots and lots of how-to books that this could be a really great strategy about. Gia, I don't know any titles offhand about books on flow, but I guarantee you if you do a web search, you'll find some great ones. There were, and I'm not sure if there's, I'm trying to remember the name of the author. I can't remember at the moment, but there's a whole institute that's based on creating flow. Where they have courses and they have all kinds of stuff related to being in flow and learning how to optimize being in flow. But anyway, so, okay, thank you. Dido posted an article, What is Flow? So you guys might want to check that out. I don't know if what I'm talking about is even in alignment with what they're defining there. So Rosalind says, what if getting into flow is coming from a place to make progress when there is a sense of desperation? I think that desperation is the enemy of flow. I think that urgency is something that prohibits flow. You know, because what that desperation is by its very nature resistance. You know, it's resisting it's creating barriers. It's creating barriers to openness, right? It's like, oh, I have to, it's constrictive, it's contractive. Anyway, so I just have to share this about Blinkist because it was pretty funny. It cracked me up also. So the first thing that I saw on Blinkist was about decluttering and minimalism, right? Because I would like to be able to declutter. Minimalism is about simplifying, right? And so the blink, they're called blinks, these little segments that they capture from the book or whatever, was about digital decluttering. And here I am on Blinkist, which is about more, right? It's about being able to get more information quicker, you know, which is kind of accumulating rather than decluttering, rather than minimalism. It was more how to maximize. So I thought that was pretty funny too. I don't know if you get the irony the way that I did, but it struck me as pretty funny. And what was my temptation for these audio segments? My temptation was to increase the speed to 1.5 speed so I could hear it more quickly. You know, so I'm getting this condensed piece of information that I want to condense further. And what is it about? It's about less, you know, rather than about more. And here I'm doing the more thing. It was just really funny. I got to see myself in that. But anyway, in terms of flow, when we're in flow, we do get to see the winks of the universe more often, I think. Anyway, it's Friday, and I invite you to be in flow, to find flow, whatever that may look like for you. And Rosalind says, as you start The walk on the way appears. The path will keep unraveling for you. It helps to bring about peace, whether the desired condition appears or not. 100%, Rosalind, 100%. That what we get to do is put one foot in front of the other. And there is a sense of trust in flow, like relinquishing the compulsion to control. And Dido, you're so welcome. Thank you. And thank you, everybody else, all you guys, for being here and for engaging and listening and sharing this stuff. I really believe the path to our perfect world is first initiated by our way of thinking and being. So that's what this stuff is all about, is transforming the way we think and be to find greater harmony with ourselves, each other, and the world in which we live. So on that note, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And at 9 a.m. Eastern each weekday morning. And it is such a privilege to be here with you on Enlightened World Network, the Facebook page. And please check out the other awesome programming from Enlightened World Network on the Facebook pages for Enlightened World Living and EWN One with the Earth. And until next time, so much love and very deep appreciation for you.